Welcome back, my friend. Before tonight's story begins, take a quiet moment for yourself. Let the noise of the day fade. Close the curtains, dim the lights, and allow your body to soften into rest. Relax your shoulders, your hands, your breathing, and your tired thoughts. Here, we gently explore history and science in a calm, sleep-friendly way, made to help you unwind at the end of a long day. If you are new here, please subscribe so you can return to another peaceful story whenever you need rest. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and let tonight's quiet journey begin. So tonight, we're not following light, not waves, not movement. We're going somewhere much quieter than that. A place where creatures don't wait for sunrise, because sunrise has never existed there at all. And as we move deeper, you may begin to notice something unexpected, that even in complete darkness, life doesn't disappear. It simply becomes something else. The world where light never comes. There is a moment somewhere far below the surface of the ocean when light finally gives up, not gradually, not with a dramatic fade, but quietly. One moment, there is still a faint blue glow above you, a distant reminder of the sky, and then, without warning, it disappears. No horizon, no shadow, no direction, just darkness. Not the kind of darkness you find in a quiet room at night, where your eyes slowly adjust and shapes begin to return. This is different. Here, darkness is not the absence of light. It is the natural state of existence. And yet, this is not an empty place. If you were to descend slowly into this world, not rushing, just drifting down, you might begin to notice something unusual. At first, it would feel like nothing is there. The water grows colder. The pressure builds gently around you. The sounds you once knew, waves, wind, distant motion, fade into something softer, something almost still. And then, very faintly, a glow, not bright, not steady, just a small pulse appearing and then gone. If you wait long enough, another one appears somewhere else, and then another, like distant stars scattered across a sky that no longer exists. These are not reflections. They are not echoes of the surface. They are alive. In a world where sunlight has never reached, life did not disappear. It adapted. It learned to create its own light. For most of human history, this place was unimaginable. People understood the ocean as something vast, something powerful, but always connected to the sun. Fish followed the light. Plants depended on it. The surface shimmered because of it. The idea that life could exist completely separated from sunlight felt almost impossible. And yet, as technology slowly allowed us to descend deeper, to travel further into the unknown, we began to discover something unexpected. The deeper we went, the stranger life became. Creatures without eyes, creatures with transparent bodies, creatures that never swim upward, never see the surface, never experience day or night, because for them there is no such thing. Time does not pass. In light and darkness here, there is only continuity, a stillness that stretches on without interruption. If you were to pause here, in this silent depth, you might begin to notice something else. Movement, not fast, not purposeful, but slow. Something drifting past you, almost unnoticed. A shape soft at the edges, barely visible unless it chooses to be, and then suddenly it glows, a soft blue pulse, just for a moment, not enough to illuminate the space, but enough to reveal itself. And then dark again. This is how life communicates here, not through sound, not through color as we know it, but through light, brief, intentional, precise, a signal in the dark. Sometimes it is used to find others, sometimes to avoid being found, and sometimes it simply happens as part of existing in a world where visibility itself is rare. You might expect this place to feel hostile. After all, there is no sunlight. The temperature is near freezing. The pressure is immense. And yet, nothing here feels aggressive. There is no rush, no urgency. Everything moves as if time itself has slowed down. Creatures drift rather than chase. They wait rather than pursue. Energy is precious here. Without sunlight, there are no vast food chains powered by plants, no abundance in the way we understand it. Instead, life survives on patience, on efficiency, on doing only what is necessary and nothing more. If you continue to drift deeper, the darkness does not change. It does not become darker. It simply remains complete, and yet the life within it becomes more intricate. The lights you begin to see are no longer random. They follow patterns. A slow rhythm, like breathing, a sudden flash, like a signal, a gentle glow that lingers just long enough to suggest presence before fading again. It is as if this entire world speaks in a language made of light, a language that does not need words. And perhaps the most surprising part of all is that none of this feels unnatural. At first, it seems impossible. A world without sunlight should not support life. But the longer you remain here, the more it begins to feel complete, not lacking, not broken, just different. Because life does not depend on light. It adapts to whatever exists. And here, darkness is not a limitation. It is simply the environment. So tonight, we are not exploring the surface, not the waves, not the horizon, not the places where sunlight dances across the water. We are going somewhere quieter than that, somewhere deeper, a place where light is no longer given, but created, and where the creatures that live here have never needed the sun to exist at all. Creatures that carry their own light. If you remain here long enough, in this quiet, endless dark, you begin to notice something subtle. The light you saw before, those faint pulses drifting through the water, they are not random. They belong to something. Not reflections, not distant echoes, but living creatures moving slowly through a world that never sees the sun. At first, it is difficult to understand what you are looking at. A small glow appears, then disappears. Moments later, another one. Somewhere else, there is no clear shape, no outline, just light existing briefly in the dark. But if you wait, if you allow your attention to settle, you begin to see more. The glow does not come from outside. It comes from within. There are creatures here that do not rely on sunlight at all. They do not search for it. They do not remember it. Instead, they carry their own light, a soft, steady glow beneath their skin, or a sudden flash released into the water, or tiny points of light arranged along their bodies, like constellations that move, each one different, each one precise. One drifts slowly past you now. You almost miss it. Its body is nearly invisible, transparent like a fragile outline made of water itself. And then a gentle blue light begins to form along its sides, not bright enough to illuminate the space around it, but enough to reveal its presence. For a moment, you can see it, the delicate structure of its body, the slow rhythm of its movement, the quiet way it exists. And then the light fades. It disappears again, not because it left, but because it chose to become unseen. In this world, visibility is optional. Light is not constant. It is used carefully. Some creatures glow softly, almost continuously, a dim, steady presence, like a distant lantern. Others remain completely dark until suddenly a flash, bright, brief, gone. We need not to illuminate, but to signal or to distract or simply to exist for a moment in a place where nothing is ever seen for long. If you watch closely, you begin to notice patterns, a pulse, pause, pulse, a slow rhythm that repeats over and over again. It is not random. It is communication, not in words, not in sound, but in light, a language that moves through the darkness from one creature to another without ever needing to fill the space between them. Some lights are soft, almost gentle, others sharp and sudden. Some drift slowly, carried by the quiet movement of the water. Others move with intention, appearing exactly where they need to be, and then disappearing just as quickly. And yet, nothing feels rushed. Even the sudden flashes feel calm, because here there is no urgency, only timing. You might begin to wonder, why light at all? Why create something visible in a world that does not require it? The answer is not simple, because light here is not one thing. It serves many purposes. For some, it is a way to find others in a space where everything looks the same, where distance cannot be measured and shapes are almost impossible to see. A small glow can mean everything, a signal that something else exists nearby, not the surface, not the sky, but another presence within the same darkness. For others, light is a form of protection. A sudden flash can confuse. A trail of glowing particles can distract. A body that blends perfectly into the faint light above can disappear completely, even when something is looking directly at it. In a place where being seen can mean everything, light becomes a way to control that moment, to choose when to appear and when not to. And for some, light is simply part of who they are, not a tool, not a strategy, just existence, a quiet glow that follows them wherever they go, like breathing, like drifting, like being. If you stay long enough, you begin to notice something else. The darkness no longer feels empty. It begins to feel alive, not crowded, not overwhelming, but gently, continuously active. Lights appear, fade, reappear somewhere else. Movements overlap without ever colliding. Each creature moving in its own path, unaware or unconcerned with the others, and yet somehow connected. It is easy to think of this place as isolated, a world cut off from everything above. But here, in the quiet exchange of light, there is a kind of connection, subtle, unspoken, but present. You might begin to realize that this world is not lacking anything. It does not need sunlight. It does not need color in the way we understand it, because it has something else, a different way of seeing, a different way of being seen. And the longer you remain here, the more natural it begins to feel the slow movement, the quiet pulses, the absence of anything unnecessary. Everything serves a purpose. Everything exists exactly as it needs to. Somewhere in the distance, another glow appears. Brighter this time, it lingers just a little longer. Not enough to reveal everything, but enough to draw your attention. And then it begins to move, not drifting, not floating, but guiding, as if there is something deeper still, something waiting further into the dark. So for now, we follow the light, not quickly, not with urgency, just slowly, as everything does here, into a world where light is not given, but carried, and where every glow means something. The creatures that glow to be seen and not seen. As you continue to follow the faint movements of light, drifting deeper into this quiet, endless world, you begin to notice something unusual. Not all light here means the same thing. Some glows invite attention, others seem to avoid it, and some do both at the same time. At first, this feels difficult to understand. Light should reveal. It should make something easier to see, clearer, more defined. But here, in this place where darkness is complete, light does something else. It can hide. A faint glow appears ahead of you now, soft, steady. It does not move much, just drifting slowly, as if it belongs exactly where it is. If you focus on it, it becomes clearer. A small creature suspended in the water, its body barely visible, but outlined by a gentle light that traces along its shape. For a moment, it seems exposed, easy to find, easy to notice, and yet, the longer you look, the more it begins to disappear, because the light it produces does not stand out. It blends far above. Though you cannot see it from here, there is still a distant trace of light filtering down from the surface. Not enough to illuminate anything, but enough to create a faint gradient, a barely noticeable shift between slightly less dark and completely dark. And this creature matches it perfectly. Its glow is not brighter than the environment. It is the same. So when something looks upward from below, it does not see a shape. It does not see a body. It sees nothing unusual, just the faint, distant glow of what might be above. This is how it hides, not by disappearing into darkness, but by becoming part of the only light that exists. If you drift a little closer, the illusion breaks. You begin to see the edges again, the form, the quiet movement of something alive. But from a distance, from the right angle, it is gone. In this world, to be seen and to not be seen are not opposites. They are choices. Another light appears now, further away, different, not steady this time, but pulsing. A quick flash, then darkness. A pause, then another flash. It feels deliberate, not random, as if it is trying to draw attention. You watch, and slowly something else begins to take shape. Not the light itself, but what surrounds it. A darker outline, barely visible against the black water. Still waiting. The light flashes again, and for a brief moment, it becomes clear. The glow is not the creature. It is something it produces, something separate, a small, moving point of light held just far enough from its body to create distance. So when something approaches, it does not approach the creature, it approaches the light. And in that moment, the distance closes, not quickly, not violently, but quietly, efficiently. and then stillness again. The light disappears, the shape fades back into the darkness, and once more it becomes almost impossible to tell that anything was ever there. Here, light is not always truth. Sometimes it is a suggestion, a direction, a distraction. If you continue to watch, you begin to see more variations. Some creatures create patterns, lines of light that ripple along their bodies, moving in waves, almost like breathing. Others release small glowing particles into the water, tiny drifting lights that linger even after they have moved on. A trail, a memory of where they were that slowly fades. And then there are those that remain completely dark until the exact moment they choose not to be. No warning, no gradual glow, just a sudden bright flash, enough to interrupt the stillness, enough to change what is happening, and then nothing again. Each method precise, each use of light intentional, nothing wasted, because here energy matters. Every movement, every signal, every glow has a cost. So light is used carefully, not constantly, not freely, only when it serves a purpose. And yet, despite all of this, nothing feels chaotic, nothing feels aggressive. Everything unfolds slowly, as if each creature understands exactly how much and how little it needs to do. If you pause again and allow yourself to simply observe, the patterns begin to feel familiar, not because you recognize them, but because they repeat. A rhythm of appearance and disappearance, of presence and absence, light and dark. It is not a conflict, it is a balance. And somewhere within that balance, life continues quietly, without urgency, without excess. You may begin to realize something now, that in a world where nothing is ever fully seen, being visible is not always an advantage, and being invisible is not always safety. Sometimes it is the ability to move between the two that matters most. A final glow appears further ahead, different from the others, not soft, not scattered, but focused. A single point of light, steady, unmoving. It does not drift, it waits. And for the first time, you sense something slightly different. Not danger, not urgency, but intention. So slowly we move closer, not rushing, not disturbing the stillness, just following what little light exists in a place where seeing has never been simple. And somewhere ahead, something is waiting. The hunter that waits in the dark. The light ahead of you does not move, it does not pulse, it does not fade. It simply remains there, steady, as if it has always existed in that exact place. In a world where everything drifts, where nothing seems to stay still for long, this feels different. You slow down, not because you have to, but because everything here moves slowly. The distance between you and that single point of light closes gently, and as it does, the darkness around it begins to change. Not brighter, not clearer, but deeper. At first, there is nothing to see beyond the light itself, just that small glow floating in the black water. But if you allow your eyes to rest, if you do not try too hard to understand it, something begins to take shape, a faint outline, not moving, not drifting, waiting. The light is not separate, it belongs to something. You come a little closer, still slow, still quiet, and now you can see it, not clearly, not all at once, but enough, a form barely visible, against the darkness, still, as if it has no need to move at all. And the light is not in front of it, not beside it, but extending from it, a small, delicate structure reaching outward into the water. At the end of it, that single point of light, soft, steady, unchanging. It does not chase, it does not search, it waits. In a world where energy is limited, where movement requires effort, waiting becomes a strategy, not passive, but precise. The light draws attention just enough, not too bright, not too frequent, just enough to be noticed. And in the quiet darkness, something eventually does notice, not you, something else, something smaller, something drifting, unaware. You do not see it arrive, only the moment when it is already there, close to the light, curious in the way that creatures here often are, not cautious, not rushed, just drawn to the only visible thing in the space. The light remains steady, unchanged, and then a movement so small, so quick that it almost does not feel like movement at all. A shift, a closing of distance that was not there before, and then stillness again. The light disappears, not abruptly, not dramatically. It simply goes out. The shape returns to being part of the darkness, unmoving, unseen. If you had not been watching, if you had arrived just moments later, you would not know that anything had happened at all. This is how hunting exists here, not through speed, not through pursuit, but through patience. The creature does not waste energy. It does not chase what it cannot reach. It creates a moment and waits for that moment to come to it. And when it does, the action is brief, almost invisible, and then everything returns to quiet. There is no struggle here, no chaos, just a change from one state to another. You remain still for a while longer, watching. The darkness settles again. The faint currents move slowly around you, and then once more a light appears, not far from where the last one was. Perhaps the same creature, perhaps another. It is impossible to tell. The glow is identical, soft, steady, patient, and you begin to understand that this is not rare. It is not unusual. It is simply how life continues here, not through constant motion, not through endless searching, but through knowing exactly when to act and when to remain still. In a place where nothing is ever fully seen, waiting becomes a kind of awareness, a quiet attention that does not need to move to understand. The creatures here do not rush, they do not panic, they exist in rhythm with the stillness around them, and somehow that stillness is enough. You may begin to feel it too. The absence of urgency, the quiet acceptance of time passing without needing to measure it. The light ahead continues to glow, not calling, not signaling, just existing. And slowly, very slowly, you realize something. In this world, it is not the fastest or the strongest that survives. It is the one that knows how to wait. So for now, we do the same. We remain here in the quiet dark, watching the small, steady light that reveals and conceals at the same time. Because deeper still, there are other creatures, other patterns, other ways that life continues without ever needing the sun. Bodies that barely exist. As you drift a little further beyond the quiet waiting lights, something begins to change. Not the darkness, that remains the same, but the shapes within it become stranger. At first, you might not even recognize them as creatures. There is no clear outline, No solid form, just something slightly different from the water around it. A faint ripple moving where nothing else seems to move. A soft distortion, as if the darkness itself is shifting. You look closer, and slowly, very slowly, a shape begins to appear. It is not defined, not in the way you expect. There are no sharp edges, no clear boundaries. Its body seems to blend into the water, almost completely transparent, so much so that it is difficult to tell where it begins and where the ocean ends. It drifts, not swimming, not pushing against the water, just carried, as if it belongs more to the current than to itself. And for a moment, you might wonder if it is even alive. But then a movement, subtle, a slight contraction, a gentle unfolding, a rhythm, slow, consistent, alive. In this world, having a solid body is not always an advantage. The deeper you go, the less structure matters. There are no strong currents to fight, no surfaces to rest on, nothing to hold on to. So many creatures here have let go of form. They have become soft, flexible, almost weightless. Their bodies are not built for strength. They are built for existing. Another one drifts past you now, even more delicate than the first. Its shape changes as it moves, stretching, folding, as if it has no fixed structure at all. Faint lines of light run through it like slow currents beneath its surface, not bright, not meant to be seen from far away, just enough to reveal that something is there. And then it turns, not sharply, not with intention, just a gentle shift as the water carries it in a new direction. Everything about it feels temporary, as if it could disappear at any moment, not by leaving, but by dissolving completely into the space around it. You begin to notice more of them, some larger, some smaller, each one different, and yet similar in one way. They do not resist their environment. They become it in a place where pressure is immense, where energy is limited, and where visibility is almost nothing. This way of existing makes sense. There is no need for armor, no need for speed, no need for anything that requires more than what is absolutely necessary. So their bodies are minimal, thin membranes, soft structures, sometimes nothing more than a drifting form held together just enough to remain whole. And yet, within that simplicity, life continues. If you look closely, you can see systems at work, tiny movements inside their bodies, slow pulses, subtle exchanges, nothing wasted, nothing excessive. Even their movement is not truly their own. They do not swim in the way surface creatures do. They do not push forward. They do not chase. They drift, and when they need to move, they do so gently. A small contraction, a slight release, just enough to change direction, no more than that. And as you watch them, you begin to feel something else, a kind of calm, because nothing here is trying to be more than it is. There is no urgency to grow larger, no need to become stronger, no competition that can be seen, just existence. One of the creatures drifts closer now, so close that for a moment it almost disappears entirely, because its body is nearly invisible. Only when the faint internal light pulses do you see it again, a soft glow moving through something that is barely there, and then dark again. It continues past you without noticing or needing to. You are not part of its world, and it is not part of yours. And yet, for this brief moment, you share the same space. It is easy to think of life as something solid, something defined, something that holds its shape. But here, life is different. It is fluid, changing, almost formless, and still it persists. You remain here, watching these quiet, drifting forms as they move through a place where nothing is ever fully seen. And slowly, you begin to understand that in a world without sunlight, without landmarks, without direction, being barely there is not a weakness. It is a way of belonging. So for now, we continue drifting further into the dark, where life becomes even more subtle and even more strange, and where some creatures are not just transparent, but almost impossible to perceive at all. The creatures you can't quite see. As you continue drifting through this quiet, weightless dark, you begin to notice something even more subtle. Some creatures here are not just transparent, they are almost impossible to perceive at all. At first, it feels like nothing is there, only the same still darkness, the same slow movement of water, but then a small disturbance, not a shape, not a shadow, just a change. Something passes through the space beside you without revealing itself. You wait, not searching too hard, just allowing your awareness to settle into the stillness. And slowly, something begins to emerge, not by becoming visible, but by becoming slightly different. A faint shift in the water, a barely noticeable curve where there should be none. It is like trying to see something that does not want to be seen. You move a little closer, carefully, and then, for just a moment, you catch it, a thin outline so delicate that it disappears as soon as you notice it. Not gone, just no longer distinguishable. These creatures do not rely on light to reveal themselves. They do not glow. They do not outline their bodies. Instead, they exist just beyond perception. Their bodies are made in such a way that light passes through them without interruption. No reflection, no shadow, nothing for the eye to hold on to. In a world where being seen can change everything, this becomes a kind of protection, not by hiding behind something, but by becoming almost nothing at all. Another movement just ahead. This time, you notice it sooner, not because it is clearer, but because your awareness has changed. You are no longer looking for shapes. You are noticing differences. The way the water bends, the way the darkness shifts, the way something moves without ever showing itself. And slowly, the invisible begins to feel present. One of the creatures drifts closer. You cannot see its full body, only fragments, a faint edge, a suggestion of form, and then a soft pulse. Not light, not exactly, but something inside it, momentarily shifting. For a brief instant, you see through it, not the creature itself, but the way it exists. Layers, thin structures, almost like glass, delicate, precise, and then it fades again. If you did not remain still, if you moved too quickly, you would miss it completely. Because here, visibility is not constant, it is momentary. These creatures do not announce themselves. They do not signal. They do not need to. They exist quietly, moving through the water as if they are part of it. And perhaps, in many ways, they are. You begin to realize something now. In this place, seeing is not always reliable. What you notice depends on how you look. If you search for clear shapes, you will find nothing. If you wait and allow the smallest changes to matter, you begin to see more. Not clearly, but enough. Another presence passes by. You feel it more then you see it. A slight shift in the water, a quiet displacement. It moves slowly, without sound, without light, and yet it is there. You begin to understand that this world is full, not empty, not silent, just subtle. Everything exists at the edge of perception, and because of that, nothing feels overwhelming. There is no crowding, no chaos, just layers of presence moving gently through the same space without ever fully revealing themselves. If you remain here long enough, your awareness changes again. You stop trying to see everything. You begin to accept that some things will only ever be partially known. A faint curve, a passing movement, a momentary shift, and that is enough, because here clarity is not necessary. Existence does not depend on being fully understood. The creatures around you continue to drift, unseen, unnoticed, and yet completely alive. You remain still, not observing in the way you once did, but simply present, and slowly the idea of invisibility begins to feel less like absence and more like a different kind of presence, a presence that does not need to be seen to exist. And somewhere ahead, something changes again, not brighter, not louder, but more defined, as if, after all this subtlety, there are creatures here that have chosen a different path, not to disappear, but to become something else entirely. So gently, we continue deeper into a world where life is not only hidden, but sometimes transformed. Bodies that turn into something else. As you move deeper through layers of quiet movement and near invisibility, you begin to notice something that feels different, not just subtle, but changing. At first, it is difficult to understand what you are seeing. A shape appears, soft, indistinct. It drifts slowly, almost like the others. Nothing unusual. And then, Thinecore, without warning, it begins to shift, not moving from one place to another, but changing within itself. Its edges blur, its form stretches, then folds inward again, as if it does not belong to any single shape. You remain still, watching carefully. The creature does not rush. The transformation is slow, gentle. A rounded form becomes elongated. A smooth surface becomes layered. A thin structure thickens, then softens again. There is no fixed pattern, no final form. It is not becoming something else. It is simply adjusting in a world where nothing is stable, where light does not guide and structure is not required. Form becomes flexible. Some creatures here do not remain the same. They shift in response to the water around them, to pressure, to movement, or sometimes for no visible reason at all. Another one appears nearby. This one even more fluid. At first, it looks like a thin ribbon, almost flat. Then slowly, it gathers inward, becoming thicker, more compact. Its movement changes with it. When it is stretched, it drifts widely, catching more of the current. When it is compact, it sinks slightly, moving in a different direction, not by force, but by form. Its body becomes a way of navigating. You begin to realize something now. These creatures do not only move through the water, they shape themselves to move with it. No resistance, no struggle, just adaptation. And within that, a kind of quiet control. One of them drifts closer, closer than the others have. For a moment, it seems almost still. Then a slow ripple passes through its body, not external, internal, as if something within it is reorganizing, A section contracts, another expands. The entire form changes, not dramatically, not in a way that draws attention, but enough to become something new. And then it continues drifting as if nothing has happened. There is no beginning to the change, no clear end, just a continuous process of becoming. You watch as another shape nearby does something similar. It spreads out, thin and wide, almost like a soft veil in the water. Then slowly it gathers back into itself, becoming smaller, denser. Each state serves a purpose, though that purpose is not always visible. In this world, function does not need to be obvious. It only needs to be enough. The longer you observe, the more natural it begins to feel. That a body does not need to stay the same. That form is not fixed. That identity is not tied to a single shape. Everything here is allowed to shift, allowed to respond without resistance. And perhaps that is what allows life to continue. In a place where nothing is constant, a faint glow passes through one of the creatures, not bright, just a soft internal movement of light. As its form changes, the light moves with it, stretching, folding, disappearing, then returning, as if even the light belongs to the change. You begin to feel something else now, a sense of calm, because nothing here is trying to hold on to a fixed state. Nothing is forcing itself to remain unchanged. Everything adapts as it needs to, quietly, naturally. And because of that, nothing feels out of place. You remain drifting, surrounded by forms that shift without urgency, without effort. And slowly, the idea of a single, stable shape begins to feel less important. Because here, to survive is not about staying the same. It is about knowing how to become something else when it is needed. Further ahead, the darkness deepens again, not visually, but in feeling, as if something more structured, more defined, exists beyond this quiet fluidity. Creatures that do not disappear, creatures that do not shift, but remain exactly as they are. So gently, we continue drifting forward, leaving behind the world of changing forms and moving towards something that holds its shape in a place where almost nothing else does. The creatures that refuse to change. As you move forward, leaving behind the quiet world of shifting forms, something begins to feel different again. Not softer, not more fluid, but more still. At first, you might not notice it because everything here is already slow, already quiet. But then you begin to sense it, a presence that does not drift, a shape that does not adjust, something that remains exactly where it is. You come a little closer, slowly, and there, emerging from the darkness, is a form that does not change. It is not transparent in the same way as the others, not dissolving into the water. It holds itself together firmly. Its outline is clearer, not sharp, but certain. For the first time in a while, you can recognize something stable, a body that keeps its shape. It does not stretch. It does not fold. It does not become something else. It simply remains. You watch it carefully, waiting to see if it will shift, if it will soften, if it will adapt. But it does not. Even as the water moves gently around it, even as faint currents pass by, it stays the same, not resisting, not struggling, just unchanging. There is something quiet about this, not rigid, not forced, but intentional, as if this creature has chosen a different way of existing, not by adapting its form, but by maintaining it. You begin to notice more of them, some resting lightly against the unseen depths below, some suspended in place with just enough movement to remain where they are. Each one distinct. Their bodies are more defined, more structured, not heavy, but complete. They do not rely on becoming invisible. They do not dissolve into the water. They exist as they are, and somehow that is enough. One of them lies just ahead, still, its surface faintly textured, not smooth like the drifting forms. You move closer, carefully. There is no reaction, no shift. It does not acknowledge your presence. It simply continues being what it is. And in that stillness, there is a kind of strength, not active, not forceful, but steady. In a world where so much is uncertain, where shapes change and visibility fades, remaining the same becomes its own form of survival. You begin to understand something now. There is no single way to exist here. Some creatures adapt constantly, shifting, changing. Others do not change at all, and both continue. The still ones do not chase. They do not seek. They wait, not in the same way as the hunters before, not with intention, but with presence. They are part of their environment, not by blending into it, but by becoming a fixed point within it, a place where movement slows, a place where something remains. You drift past one of them for a moment. You can see it more clearly than anything else around you, not because it shines, not because it moves, but because it does not change. And in a world of constant subtle motion, that difference becomes visible. You move on. Slowly, the still forms fade back into the darkness behind you, and once again, the world becomes fluid, soft, but something has changed. You now understand that life here does not follow a single path. It does not choose between movement and stillness, between change and stability. It allows both, and in that balance, everything continues. You remain drifting, no destination, no urgency, just moving through a place where existence takes many forms, and slowly, as the last of the still shapes disappear behind you, the darkness ahead begins to feel different again, not softer, not quieter, but deeper, as if what comes next will move beyond form entirely, beyond visibility, beyond structure, into something even more subtle. So gently, we continue, leaving behind what can be seen and even what can be recognized, and moving toward a world where life becomes something else entirely. The creatures that feel instead of see. As you drift further into a darkness that no longer feels empty, something begins to change again, not in what you see, but in how you notice. Up to now, even in this quiet world, there was still something to look for, a faint glow, a shifting outline, a subtle movement. But here, those things begin to fade. The darkness remains complete. The water remains still. And yet, you sense something, not clearly, not directly, just a presence. It is not visible. It does not glow, but it is there. At first, you might think it is nothing, just the movement of water, a passing current. But then it happens again, a slight change, not in light, not in shape, but in feeling, as if something has moved without revealing itself. You remain still, not searching with your eyes now, but allowing your awareness to expand. And slowly, you begin to understand There are creatures here that do not depend on sight at all, not because they cannot see, but because there is nothing to see. No sunlight, no reflections, no consistent light to rely on. So instead, they feel, they sense the water around them, the smallest movement, the faintest disturbance, a shift in pressure, a change in flow, things that would go unnoticed anywhere else. But here, they become everything. Something passes near you again. You do not see it, but you feel a slight change in the water, as if space itself has adjusted. It is enough for them. It is more than enough. These creatures do not need to see you. They know you are there because the water tells them. Every movement creates a signal. Every presence leaves a trace. And in this world, those traces do not disappear quickly. They linger softly. You begin to notice patterns. When you move slightly, the water responds, and somewhere, something else responds too. Not immediately, not dramatically, but subtly. A presence shifts, a direction changes, as if something has felt what you did. You remain still again, and the water settles. The signals fade, and once more, everything becomes quiet. This is how life exists here, not by seeing, not by searching, but by sensing, a continuous awareness of everything that moves and everything that does not. You begin to feel it too, the way the water carries information, the way even the smallest movement creates a ripple that spreads outward. You realize that nothing here is truly hidden, not in the way you once thought, because even without light, presence can still be known. A creature drifts somewhere nearby. You do not see it, but you know it is there because something changes. A slight pressure, a subtle shift, not enough to disturb the stillness, but enough to be noticed if you are paying attention. And here, everything is paying attention. There is no distraction, no excess, just awareness. The creatures move slowly, not because they must, but because speed would create too much disturbance, too much signal. And in a world where everything can be felt, that signal matters. So they move gently, carefully, not to hide, but to remain balanced within the space around them. You begin to understand something now. Vision is not the only way to know the world. Here, it is not even the most important, because when there is nothing to see, feeling becomes clarity, a different kind of perception, one that does not rely on light, one that does not need distance, only presence. You remain here, drifting quietly, becoming aware of the smallest changes around you, and slowly the idea of sight begins to fade, not disappearing, but becoming less necessary, because everything you need to know is already here in the movement of water, in the quiet signals that pass through it, and in the creatures that understand those signals without ever needing to see them. Further ahead, something shifts again, not in form, not in light, but in rhythm, as if the world itself is moving differently. And somewhere within that change, there are creatures that do not just feel, but respond in ways that shape the space around them. So gently, we continue deeper into a place where awareness itself becomes a way of life. The creatures that listen to movement. As you remain within this quiet awareness where sight has already begun to fade, something else begins to take its place. Not seeing, not even just feeling, but listening, not in the way you understand sound. There is no clear noise here, no echo, no voice. And yet, there is something to hear. It begins as a subtle realization. The water is not still, even when it seems calm. Even when nothing appears to move, it is always in motion. Slow, gentle, continuous. And within that motion, there are patterns, tiny shifts, soft vibrations, not loud enough to be heard as sound, but present enough to be understood. The creatures here do not wait for something to appear. They listen to how the water moves. A faint ripple passes through the space around you. It is small, almost nothing, but somewhere nearby, something notices. You do not see it, but you sense a response, a slight adjustment, a quiet change in direction, as if something has heard what you could not. These creatures do not rely on eyes. They do not search visually. Instead, they are tuned to movement itself. Every shift in the water becomes information, every disturbance a message. And because this world is so still, even the smallest signal can travel. You begin to notice it more clearly now. When something moves, it leaves behind a pattern, not visible, but traceable. A gentle wave spreading outward, and somewhere within that wave, there are creatures listening, not actively, not with effort, but naturally, as if their entire existence is designed to receive. You remain still again. The water settles, the patterns fade, and for a moment, there is nothing. Then, very softly, a new movement begins. Not yours, something else, far enough away that you cannot feel it directly, but the water carries it. A faint vibration, not a sound, but almost like one. You do not hear it, but you become aware of it, and somewhere, something responds. A shift, a change. The direction of movement adjusts, as if the creature has located something without ever needing to see it. This is how they navigate, not by sight, not by light, but by listening to the movement of everything around them. The ocean becomes a kind of map, not fixed, not visual, but constantly updating. Every movement redraws it, every presence reshapes it, and the creatures within it understand that map without needing to see it. You begin to feel it more deeply now. The way the water carries information, the way movement travels, even when it is small, and how nothing here is truly isolated, because everything that moves affects everything else. A creature glides somewhere nearby. You do not see it, but the water shifts, and in that shift, you know it is there. Not clearly, not precisely, but enough. That is all that is needed. These creatures do not require perfect knowledge. They do not need clarity. They respond to what is present, to what can be sensed in the moment. That is enough to survive, enough to move, enough to find, and enough to remain. You drift slowly, becoming more aware of the patterns around you, the quiet language of movement, the way everything speaks without sound, and how listening does not require ears, only presence. Time feels different here, not measured by light, not divided into moments, but flowing with the movement of the water itself. Each ripple, a brief event, each stillness, a pause, and within that rhythm, life continues quietly, precisely. Further ahead, the patterns begin to change again, not stronger, not louder, but more complex, as if the signals are no longer just passing through, but being shaped, altered, and somewhere within that change, there are creatures that do more than listen. They influence. They create movement in ways that reach beyond their own bodies. So gently, we continue into a place where the water itself becomes something that can be shaped by those who live within it. the creatures that shape the water around them. As you continue drifting within this quiet world of movement and awareness, something begins to feel different again. Until now, everything you noticed was something that passed through the water, a ripple, a vibration, a subtle shift. But here, the movement does not only travel, it is created. At first, it is almost impossible to tell. A gentle change in the current, so soft that it feels like part of the natural flow. But then you notice something. The pattern repeats, not exactly the same, but similar. A movement that begins in one place and spreads outward in a controlled way, not random, intentional. You remain still, watching, and slowly a shape begins to emerge, not clearly, not fully, but enough to understand that something is there. It does not move much, not in the way other creatures do. Instead, it affects the water around it, a slow contraction, a gentle release, and from that, a wave, small, measured, but precise. The water responds immediately. A ripple forms, spreading outward, carrying with it a pattern, not chaotic, organized, as if the creature is not just existing in the water, but shaping it. You begin to notice more of them. Some remain still, yet the water around them is never completely quiet. Tiny movements originating from their bodies, expanding outward, changing the space around them. Others move slowly, but leave behind trails of altered flow, not visible, but present. If you remain still, you can feel the difference. One area slightly calmer, another gently shifting, as if the water itself has memory, and these creatures are writing into it. You begin to understand something now. Movement here is not only a response, it is also a tool, a way of reaching beyond the body, a way of interacting with the world without needing to touch it directly. One creature nearby begins to move, not forward, but inward. Its body contracts slightly, then releases, and with that, a series of soft pulses spread outward, each one slightly different, a rhythm, not random, structured. You do not hear it, but you feel it, a sequence of movements traveling through the water like a message, and somewhere, something responds, a distant shift, another pattern forming in reply, not immediate, but connected, as if the water itself is carrying a conversation. You remain still, allowing yourself to become part of this quiet exchange. The movements pass through you, soft, gentle, and yet full of meaning. These creatures do not need to see each other. They do not need light. They reach outward through the water itself, and in doing so, they extend their presence beyond what can be seen, beyond what can be touched, into the space around them. You begin to notice how precise it all is. Nothing wasted, no unnecessary motion. Each pulse, each shift serves a purpose, and because of that, the entire space feels connected, not crowded, but aware, as if everything within it is quietly influencing everything else. One creature drifts past, leaving behind a faint trail of altered movement. You follow it, not with your eyes, but with your awareness. The water feels different where it has passed, slightly changed, and slowly that change fades, returning to stillness. Nothing permanent, only momentary influence. And yet, those moments matter, because here, even the smallest change can travel far, can reach others, can become part of something larger without ever being seen. You begin to feel a quiet sense of connection, not between creatures in the way you once understood, but between movements, between patterns, between the subtle ways that life continues, in a place where nothing is ever clearly defined. And slowly you realize that this world is not silent at all. It is full of communication, just not in the way you expected. Further ahead, the patterns begin to slow again. The movements become softer, more spaced, as if something is changing once more. Not in how the creatures sense, not in how they move, but in how they exist over time, as if some forms here are not just adapting to the moment, but to something much larger, something slower, something that stretches far beyond a single movement or a single presence. So gently, we continue into a place where life is shaped not just by the present, but by time itself, moving slowly through a world that never sees the sun. The creatures that live in slow time. As you drift further beyond the quiet patterns of movement, beyond the subtle conversations carried through the water, something begins to feel different again, not in space, but in time. At first, it is difficult to notice. Everything here is already slow, already calm. But then you begin to sense it. Some creatures do not move within the same rhythm as the others. They are slower, not just in motion, but in everything. A faint shape rests ahead. You approach gently. At first, it seems still, completely still, not drifting, not shifting, just there. You wait, and after a long moment, something changes, so slightly that it almost feels imagined. A small movement, a subtle adjustment in form, not immediate, not continuous, but delayed, as if the creature exists on a different scale of time. You remain still, watching. Another change comes. Again, slow. A part of its body shifts, just enough to be noticed. Then nothing. Stillness returns. And in that stillness, time stretches. These creatures do not respond quickly. They do not react to every movement or every signal. Instead, they exist within longer moments, moments that are not divided into seconds, but into something softer, something extended. You begin to notice more of them, some resting quietly against the unseen depths below, some suspended in the water, barely moving, each one present but not active in the way you expect. Their existence feels spaced out, as if each action is separated by long periods of stillness, not because they are inactive, but because they do not need to move often. In a world where energy is limited, where nothing changes quickly, this way of existing makes sense. There is no need for constant motion, no need for urgency. Everything unfolds slowly enough to allow for waiting. One of the creatures nearby begins to shift again. You notice it more clearly this time, a gradual change in position, not a movement from one place to another, but a reorientation, as if it has decided after a long pause to adjust, and then it becomes still again. You begin to feel something else now, a quiet slowing within yourself. Your awareness stretches, moments feel longer. There is no need to anticipate what comes next, because nothing arrives quickly. Everything takes time, and that time is not empty. It is full of presence, full of quiet continuation. You begin to understand that here, time is not something to move through. It is something to exist within. The creatures do not chase moments. They do not react to passing changes. They wait, wait, not passively, but completely, allowing each moment to unfold before the next begins. And because of that, nothing feels rushed, nothing feels incomplete. Each movement, when it happens, feels sufficient, enough. You remain drifting within this slower rhythm. The water moves gently around you. The faint signals of distant movement arrive, then fade. But nothing demands your attention. Nothing pulls you forward. You are simply here, and that is enough. Somewhere nearby, one of the creatures shifts again. You notice it, not because it is obvious, but because you are no longer expecting anything faster. You have adjusted to its pace, and in doing so, you begin to see more, not more detail, but more presence. You realize now that speed is not necessary for life. That awareness does not depend on quickness. That existence can continue even when almost nothing seems to happen. And perhaps, especially then, the darkness around you feels deeper now, not heavier, but more complete, as if everything has settled into its natural state. No urgency, no excess, just quiet continuation. And slowly you begin to feel ready to move deeper still, beyond movement, beyond sensing, into something even more distant, something that exists at the edge of what life can be. So gently we continue, leaving behind the rhythm of slow time and moving toward a place where life becomes even more unfamiliar and even more quiet. The creatures that live on almost nothing. As you continue drifting beyond the slow rhythm of time into a depth that feels even more distant, something changes once more, not in how things move, not in how they are seen, but in how they survive. At first, it feels like there should be nothing here. No light, no movement, no visible source of life, only darkness, stretching endlessly in every direction. And yet, something remains. You begin to notice it slowly. A presence, not active, not obvious, but persistent. A faint shape rests far ahead. You move closer, gently. It does not respond. It does not shift. It simply exists. There is no visible sign of energy, no movement that suggests effort, and yet it is alive. In this world, life does not rely on abundance. There is no constant source of food, no steady flow of energy from above. Everything that arrives here is rare, small particles drifting down from distant layers, fragments, barely enough to sustain anything. And yet, these creatures endure not by consuming much, but by needing almost nothing. Their bodies are simple, not weak, not incomplete, just minimal, only what is necessary. You look closer. There is no excess, no large structures, no unnecessary movement. Everything is reduced to its most essential form. Even their activity is rare. Long periods of stillness, long stretches of time without visible change, and then a small movement, so slight that it almost feels like nothing, but it is enough to adjust, enough to continue. You begin to understand something now. These creatures do not live quickly. They do not consume often. They exist in a state of waiting for the smallest opportunity, a particle drifting by, a fragment of something that once existed far above. When it arrives, they respond, not with urgency, but with precision. A small movement, a gentle capture, and then stillness again. Nothing wasted, because here there is no room for excess. Every action must matter. Every movement must serve a purpose. And because of that, everything feels quiet, not empty, but efficient. You notice another form nearby, even smaller, even more subtle. It almost blends completely into the darkness. You would not have seen it if you were not already moving so slowly. It remains still, and for a long moment, nothing happens. Then, a faint shift, a small extension, something reaches outward, barely visible, and then returns, as if it has taken in something too small to see. And once again, it becomes still. You begin to feel the rhythm of this place, not a rhythm of movement, but a rhythm of patience, long stillness, brief action, stillness again. And within that rhythm, life continues. You realize now that survival here is not about strength. It is not about speed. It is about endurance, the ability to remain without needing more, to continue with almost nothing. The darkness around you feels deeper now, not because it has changed, but because you understand it differently. This is not a place without life. It is a place where life has learned to exist with less than you thought possible. You remain drifting, surrounded by forms that do not demand attention, that do not seek, that do not chase, and yet they endure quietly, completely, and slowly. You begin to feel something else, a kind of stillness that is not empty, but full of presence, full of quiet continuation. Further ahead, something changes again, not in movement, not in form, but in origin, as if some of the life here does not depend on what falls from above, but on something else entirely, something that comes from within, the earth itself. So gently we continue deeper into a place where life is not only sustained by what remains, but by something that rises from below. The creatures that live from the earth below. As you move further beyond the quiet world of waiting, beyond the creatures that survive on almost nothing, something begins to change again, not in the darkness. That remains complete, but in the feeling of the space around you. At first, it is subtle, a slight difference in the water, not colder, not lighter, just different. You drift closer, and slowly you begin to sense it, a faint movement rising from below, not drifting downward like everything else, but upward. This is new until now. Everything has come from above. Fragments, particles, falling slowly from distant layers of the ocean. But here, something is coming from beneath you. A gentle flow, steady, continuous. You move closer still, and then, for the first time in a long while, the darkness seems to shift. Not brighter, but more active. The water moves differently here, not chaotic, but alive in a new way. And within that movement, there are shapes more defined than before. Clusters, groups of forms gathered together. You approach slowly, and now you can see them more clearly, not through light, but through presence. These creatures are not drifting alone. They exist in quiet communities, grouped around something that cannot be seen directly, but can be felt. A slow rising current, warm compared to everything else, carrying something with it. Something that does not come from the surface, but from deep within the earth. You begin to understand that life here does not depend on what falls. It depends on what rises. These creatures do not wait for fragments. They live near this source. They remain close to where the movement begins, because here There is something more, not abundant, but steady, a continuous supply of what they need. One of the forms nearby shifts slightly, not drifting away, but adjusting its position as if aligning itself with the flow. Another remains completely still, yet within it, something is happening, a slow, internal process, not visible, but present. You begin to notice that these creatures are different. They are not as minimal as those you saw before. Their forms are more defined, more structured, as if this environment allows for something more. Still quiet, still slow, but supported. The water here carries energy, not from sunlight, but from below. And these creatures have learned to use it, not through movement, but through connection. They remain where they are, allowing the flow to pass through them. And in doing so, they continue without needing to search, without needing to chase. You drift among them. The space feels different, not crowded, but gathered, a quiet concentration of life around something unseen. You realize now that this place is not empty at all. It is a source, not visible, but constant. And because of that, life here does not fade. It remains. You watch as one of the creatures slowly expands, not dramatically, just a small change, as if responding to the steady flow around it. Then it settles again. Everything here feels balanced, nothing rushed, nothing wasted, just a quiet exchange between what rises and what receives. You begin to feel something else now, a sense of stability, different from the stillness before, not empty, but supported, as if life here is not only surviving, but sustained. And yet, it remains gentle. The movement from below continues, unseen, unstoppable, and the creatures around it continue to exist in quiet alignment with it. You remain drifting within this subtle world where life does not depend on light or on what falls from above, but on something deeper, something that has always been there, rising slowly from the unseen depths below. Further ahead, the clusters begin to thin, the movement softens, and once again, the space opens, but what you have seen remains, a different way for life to exist, not waiting, but receiving. So gently, we continue, moving beyond the source into a place where life becomes even quieter and even more distant from anything familiar. The creatures that live without meeting anything. As you drift beyond the quiet clusters, leaving behind the steady flow, rising from below, the space begins to open again, not brighter, not clearer, but emptier. The faint sense of gathering fades. The subtle presence of many becomes something else, distance. At first, it is not obvious because everything here is already quiet, already still. But then you begin to feel it. There is less movement, less signal, less change. The water feels wider, not physically, but in how little there is to notice. You drift forward slowly, and for a long moment, nothing appears. No glow, no shift, only the same deep, continuous dark. And then, very faintly, something so distant that it almost feels imagined. A presence, not moving toward you, not moving away, just there. You continue drifting. The distance closes, but slowly, and even as you come closer, it does not become much clearer. A small form, still completely alone. There are no others nearby, no clusters, no overlapping movements, just one within a vast space. You pause. There is nothing else to draw your attention. No competing signals, no surrounding activity, only this single presence existing quietly in a place where almost nothing else can be felt. It does not move, not because it cannot, but because there is nothing to respond to. No nearby movement, no immediate change, only distance. You begin to notice more as your awareness adjusts, not nearby, but far, very far, another faint presence. And then, nothing again. These creatures do not live together. They do not gather. They exist separately, each one alone within its own space. The distances between them are vast, not measured in visible terms, but in the absence of interaction, you begin to understand something now. There are places in this world where life does not meet, where one presence may exist for long stretches of time without ever encountering another. No signals to receive, no movement to follow. Only stillness, and within that stillness, continuation. The creature before you remains unchanged. You wait, not expecting movement, but allowing time to pass. And after a long moment, there is a slight shift, barely visible, a small adjustment, not in response to anything, but simply as part of its own rhythm. Then stillness again. It does not search. It does not reach outward because there is nothing nearby to find. Instead, it exists within itself, sustained by what little arrives, maintained by its own quiet processes. You begin to feel something unfamiliar, a kind of silence that is deeper than before. Not just the absence of sound, but the absence of interaction. No exchange, no response, only presence. And yet, this does not feel empty because the creature is still here, still alive, still continuing. You realize now that connection is not required for life to exist. That awareness can remain even without anything to respond to. That presence alone is enough. You drift past it slowly. It does not follow. It does not react. It remains exactly where it is. And soon it fades into the darkness behind you. Once again, there is nothing, only space, only distance, and somewhere far beyond what you can sense, another presence exists, also alone, also continuing. You move forward. There is no direction, no destination, just quiet movement through a world where life does not need to meet to remain. And slowly you begin to understand that even in complete isolation, life does not disappear. It continues silently, completely, and without needing anything beyond itself. Further ahead, the darkness begins to feel different again, not emptier, but more distant, as if what comes next exists even further from anything familiar, something that has adapted to the very edge of what life can be. So gently we continue, deeper still, into a place where existence becomes even more subtle and even more quiet than anything we have known so far. Section 444. The creatures at the edge of existence. As you move deeper, beyond distance, beyond isolation, into a space that feels almost beyond perception, something changes again, not in what you notice, but in how little there is to notice at all. The water feels still, not calm, but nearly untouched, as if movement itself has become rare. You drift forward, slowly. There is no sign of anything, no presence, no shift, no trace. And yet, you continue, because something here still exists. At first, it is impossible to find, not hidden, but almost unreachable. You wait. Time stretches long enough that the idea of time itself begins to fade, and then something appears, not clearly, not suddenly, but gradually, a faint presence emerging at the edge of awareness. You do not see its full form. You cannot define its shape, but you know it is there. Barely. You move closer. The change is minimal. It does not become clearer, only slightly more present, as if this is all it can be. Not fully full, not fully visible, just enough to exist. These are not creatures in the way you have understood them before. They do not move in recognizable patterns. They do not respond. They do not signal. They simply remain at the very edge of what life can be. You begin to sense something different here. Not stillness, but absence. Not emptiness, but reduction. Everything unnecessary has been removed. Everything that once defined life has become smaller, simpler, until what remains is only the most essential part. Continuation. You watch carefully. There is no visible motion, no clear process, and yet something is happening so slowly that it cannot be measured, so quietly that it cannot be heard, and still it continues. You realize now that life does not need complexity. It does not need movement. It does not even need to be seen. At this depth, existence becomes something else, something closer to presence than activity, a state of being without change. You remain here at the edge of perception. Nothing draws your attention. Nothing shifts the space around you. And yet this place is not empty. It is simply reduced. Everything that remains has endured, not by adapting quickly, not by responding, but by becoming as minimal as possible. And in that, finding a way to continue, you begin to feel something within yourself, a quiet slowing, a release of expectation, because here nothing needs to happen, nothing needs to change, and still everything remains. You drift a little closer. The presence does not react, it does not acknowledge, it does not need to. It exists independently of anything around it, and slowly you begin to understand that this is the far edge, not of the ocean, but of life as you know it. Beyond this, there may be nothing more to perceive, nothing more to recognize, only the same quiet continuation stretching into distance without end. You remain here for a while, not observing, not searching, just present. And in that presence, everything feels complete, not because there is much, but because nothing more is needed. Eventually, you begin to move again, not away, but forward, because even here, at the edge, there is still something more to understand. Not about the creatures themselves, but about what it means to exist in a place without light, without movement, without anything familiar. So gently, we continue, leaving behind the edge of existence and moving towards something even quieter, something that is not defined by survival or adaptation, but by something deeper, something that remains even when almost everything else is gone. What remains when everything else fades? As you continue drifting, beyond everything that felt familiar, beyond movement, beyond form, beyond even the edge of what life seems to be, something begins to settle, not in the world around you, but within the space that remains. There is very little now, no visible shapes, no shifting patterns, only a quiet presence that does not ask to be noticed. You move gently forward. There is no direction, no sense of distance, just continuation. And slowly you begin to realize something. Even here, nothing has truly disappeared. It has only become quieter. Everything you have seen, everything you have sensed, everything that once moved or glowed or shifted has not ended. It has faded, reduced to something more subtle, something that does not demand attention but remains. You pause. There is nothing to observe, and yet you are aware not of any one thing, but of presence itself, a kind of awareness that does not need an object. You begin to understand that life is not only defined by what it does, not by movement, not by change, but by its ability to remain even when everything else becomes less. In the depths where light never arrives, where energy is rare, where form dissolves, and time stretches beyond measure, something continues, not loudly, not visibly, but completely. You drift slowly through a space that no longer feels empty, because now you understand it differently. It is not empty. It is quiet, a quiet that holds everything in its simplest form. You remember the light that once appeared, the soft pulses, the brief signals, now gone, but not lost, only faded into something that no longer needs to be seen. You remember the movements, the subtle shifts in the water, the patterns that once carried meaning, now still, but not ended, only absorbed into a deeper stillness. And you begin to feel something else, a sense of completeness, not because there is much, but because nothing is missing. Everything that was needed has already happened. Everything that remains is enough. You continue drifting. No destination, no purpose to reach, only presence. And within that presence, a quiet understanding begins to form. That life does not need to be constant to continue. That awareness does not need to be active to exist. That even in the absence of everything familiar, something remains, not as an event, not as a moment, but as a state, a quiet, steady existence that does not depend on anything else. You remain here for a while. There is no measure of time, no need to move forward or back, just stillness. And slowly you begin to feel that even this is part of something larger, not something that can be seen, not something that can be reached, but something that continues in the same quiet way, beyond this space, beyond this depth, beyond everything that has faded. You begin to move again, not because you need to, but because movement still exists. And as you drift forward, the quiet remains with you, not behind, but within, a reminder that even in the deepest darkness, even in the absence of light, of movement, of form, life does not disappear. It becomes something quieter, something simpler, something that does not need to be seen to be real. And gently, very gently, we continue. The quiet meaning of a world without light. As you continue drifting, carrying with you the stillness of everything you have passed, a quiet question begins to form, not clearly, not in words, but as a feeling. What does it mean for a world to exist without light? At first, it might seem like something is missing. No color, no horizon, no direction to follow. And yet, nothing here feels incomplete. You have moved through this space slowly, without urgency, and at no point did life seem absent, only different. You begin to understand that light is not what gives meaning. It is only one way of seeing, and in its absence, other ways emerge, ways that do not depend on vision, ways that do not require clarity. The creatures here do not search for light. They do not wait for it. They do not need it to continue. Instead, they exist within what is already present. Movement, stillness, pressure, time, all the things that remain even when light is gone. You begin to feel something shift within your awareness. The need to see clearly begins to soften. The need to understand fully begins to fade, because here, understanding is not built on detail. It is built on presence. You do not need to see everything to know that it is there. You do not need to find something to feel its existence. And slowly, this way of being begins to feel natural. The darkness around you is no longer something to look through. It is something to rest within, a space that does not overwhelm, a space that does not demand, only allows. You recall the creatures that carried their own light. They did not illuminate the world. They simply revealed themselves when needed and then returned to quiet. You remember the ones that could not be seen at all, and yet their presence was clear. You remember those that waited, those that drifted, those that remained even at the edge of existence. None of them required light to be complete, and neither does this world. You begin to realize something deeper now. That light is not what creates meaning. Meaning exists even in its absence, in the slow movement of water, in the quiet exchange of presence, in the simple continuation of life. Without excess, you remain still. There is nothing to search for, nothing to define, and yet everything feels whole. This world does not explain itself. It does not reveal everything. It does not need to, because it exists as it is, and that is enough. You begin to feel a kind of quiet clarity, not sharp, not detailed, but calm, a knowing that does not rely on seeing, a sense that does not need to be proven, just present. And slowly, the idea of light begins to feel less important, not gone, but no longer necessary, because what matters is still here. Presence, continuation, life in its simplest form. You drift gently within this understanding. The darkness no longer feels like something to pass through. It feels like something to remain within, a space where nothing is forced, nothing is rushed, and everything is allowed to be exactly what it is. Further ahead, there is no visible change, no signal, no shift, and yet you feel that something is coming. Not something new, but something final, a quiet closing, not of the world, but of the way you have been moving through it. So gently, we continue into a space where nothing needs to be explained and everything can simply be. Drifting without needing to arrive. As you continue drifting through a space that no longer asks anything of you, something begins to change again, not around you, but within the way you move. Until now, there was always a quiet sense of direction, a feeling of going deeper, of moving forward, of continuing. But here, that feeling begins to fade. There is no destination ahead, no place to reach, no moment to arrive at, only movement. And even that begins to soften. You drift more slowly now, not because something is stopping you, but because there is nothing pulling you forward. The water around you remains still. The darkness remains complete, and yet there is no sense of being lost because there is nowhere to go. You begin to feel something unfamiliar, a release, the quiet absence of needing to arrive anywhere. No next point, no next discovery, just this moment and the next, which feels the same. You remain here floating gently within this stillness. There is no urgency to move, no reason to search, and slowly the idea of progress begins to disappear, not because it is gone, but because it is no longer needed. You realize now that drifting is enough. That movement does not need a purpose to exist. That direction is not required for presence. The space around you does not change. No new forms appear. No signals call out. And yet, nothing feels lacking. You are still here, and that is enough. The water carries you gently, not toward anything, not away from anything, just within itself. And in that gentle motion, there is a kind of quiet rhythm, not a rhythm that leads somewhere, but one that simply continues. You begin to notice how effortless it feels to not decide, to not choose a direction, to not move with intention, only to allow what is already happening. And within that, something settles even deeper, a stillness that is not forced, a calm that does not need to be maintained. It is simply there. The idea of arrival no longer holds meaning because nothing is waiting at the end. There is no final point, only continuation. And slowly, the continuation begins to feel complete, not leading anywhere, but whole in itself. You drift for a while longer. There is no sense of time passing, no change to measure, only the quiet presence of being exactly where you are. And for the first time, you may notice something, that there is nothing missing, nothing left undone, nothing that needs to happen next. Only this quiet drift through a space that does not demand anything. You remain here, not moving forward, not holding back, just existing within the same soft motion. And slowly, even that motion begins to feel lighter, almost as if you are no longer moving at all, just present in a space where nothing needs to begin, nothing needs to end. Further ahead, there is no visible difference, no signal to follow, and yet there is a quiet sense that this is nearing something, not an ending, but a settling, a final quietness where even the idea of drifting can begin to fade. So gently, we continue into a space where nothing needs to move and everything can simply rest. The quiet that remains. As you continue through a space where even drifting has begun to soften, something settles, not around you, but within everything. There is no movement to follow, no pattern to notice, only a quiet that remains. It is not something new. It has been here all along, beneath the light, beneath the movement, beneath everything you have passed. Now, there is nothing left to reveal it, so it becomes clear you remain here. There is no need to move forward, no need to continue, because nothing is waiting ahead. Everything that needed to be seen has already been. Everything that needed to be felt has already settled. And what remains is enough. The darkness around you no longer feels like something to pass through. It feels like something that holds you gently, without direction, without expectation. You do not search, you do not follow, you simply remain. And in that remaining, something becomes very quiet. The need to notice, the need to understand, the need to continue, all of it begins to fade, not disappearing, just softening until it is no longer needed. You are still here, not as an observer, not as something separate, but as part of the same quiet space. Nothing moves, nothing changes, and yet nothing feels missing, because this is not emptiness, it is stillness, a stillness that holds everything in its simplest form. You may begin to feel it now, a deeper calm, not something you create, something you enter, and once you are within it, there is nothing else to do. The water no longer feels like something around you. The darkness no longer feels distant. Everything has become the same quiet presence, and within that presence, you can rest. There is no next moment to prepare for, no direction to choose, only this gentle stillness that does not end. You remain here for as long as you need. There is no measure of time, no sense of passing, only quiet continuation. And slowly, even the idea of continuation begins to fade until all that remains is this: a calm without movement, a presence without effort, a quiet that does not need to change. And in that quiet, you can let everything rest. There is nothing left to follow, nothing left to become. Only stillness, only presence, only the quiet that remains. And gently, very gently, we come to rest.